I was saying Yashaba Rico from RicoScores, and man, even though we just took that ugly, but at the very end, exciting, but still very disappointed L to the Rams, I have a lot of great news for y'all in this video, man. We're going to talk about why Commanders fans should be very optimistic about these upcoming months, but we got to start it off with the fact that Josh Harris put in work at the NFL's annual front office and GM Accelerator program. The NFL literally has something to where like owners and GMs, potential GMs can all meet and discuss certain things, get to know each other and all of that. And this reports that Josh Harris is one of the two most aggressive and active people there. And he also, quote, made a strong impression, unquote. So I'm telling you, man, we should be very optimistic. I think our chances of hiring the right GM are actually quite high. I feel like we're doing things differently now under Josh Harris, bringing in Eugene Shin, bringing in Tim McGrath. If you don't know who those guys are, go check out my videos where I break both of those down. But we should be super excited. And if we hit on GM, everything else is going to fall under place, and everything else, the dominoes is just going to fall where they need to be. I'm super excited about that. We get the right GM, we're more than likely going to get the right head coach. The right head coach is going to more than likely hire the right defensive coordinator, all of that type of stuff. We got to dive into everything that just went down, because what's going on in Virginia with the Capitals and the Wizards also affects us as well. So we got to talk about all of that. But before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Stay tuned for all of the content. I'm working on an upcoming mock draft, especially after what just happened in that Rams loss. Sam Howell getting benched for Jacoby Brissett, even though Rivera says it was to keep him healthy. It's definitely, obviously, more than just that. So we got to do the mock draft. I also want to talk about the fact that Cameron Cheeseman did get cut, and even though it is a long snapper getting cut, a lot of people doesn't feel like that's not a lot of like news to really dive into. But we have a lot of different angles to look at this, and especially a strong Ron Rivera angle to look at. And also we got to start diving into our team needs, because now you got to add long snapper to that. So be on the lookout for that video probably tonight, this evening, or whatever. So man, make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Again, I'm working on exclusive content for channel members. And without further ado, man, let's get it.
He's our quarterback for the 5-10 years, and I truly believe that.
All right, so this all started when I saw a tweet that says, sources said the two team owners most active and engaged with participants at the NFL's annual front office and GM Accelerator program were Washington's Josh Harris and Tepper from the Panthers. Now, I'm not surprised that Tepper was one of the most active and engaged participants there as well, but the fact that Josh Harris was up there is great, because if there's the two most active people, the people that's the most engaged, the people being the most aggressive, shaking the most hands, talking to the most people, I'm pretty sure Josh Harris looks better to potential GMs than Tepper does. So out of all the qualified good potential owners that a GM could go become a general manager for, Josh Harris is the most passionate, the most engaged, the most aggressive, and things like that. And then between the two most engaged guys, he's obviously the better, the more suited owner, the one that you would want to go be a general manager for. So we're kind of like the best of both worlds right now. It seems like Josh Harris and this new ownership, the burgundy and gold. Again, we could talk about markets with the DMV area. Like, it should be one of the top markets in all of sports, but it just doesn't feel like it because our teams just haven't been great. But it's a sleeping giant. We have so many positives. We're going to talk about that later in the video, why Commanders fans should be very optimistic about the future of the Commanders. But to hear that Josh Harris is one of the most attractive owners right now who's looking for a GM right now, yeah, it sounds excellent. It's music to my ears as a fan. So let's go ahead and dive into the Ben Standig article for The Athletic. He said the NFL calendar made multitasking easier for Josh Harris. The Washington Commanders managing partner attended the owners' meetings in Dallas this week, which doubled as the fourth front office and general manager accelerator program. This is only the fourth time they've ever done it in NFL history. Per the league, this meet and greet is designed for a selected and diverse group of candidates to receive an opportunity to build relationships with club owners and executives ahead of the hiring cycle. That's a down the road matter for most involved, not Washington. And again, I've already done a whole video reporting that Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew are gone. Rossini, Graziano, Jeremy Fowler, they all gave their different input and trustworthy sources saying that it's pretty much a done deal. And one of them even said that, first of all, Rivera's at peace with it. He already knows. And another interesting note was that Josh Harris knew he was going to fire Ron Rivera before the season even started. And then the fact that this season went even worse than expected, again, we're like 99.999% sure that this is all going to go down. We're changing everything. And the fact that he's at these accelerator programs, not only being there, but being one of the two most active owners there, doing everything that he can to talk to every and build a relationship with every potential GM possible, lets you know that Martin Mayhew is definitely gone. We already knew that before this information came out, but this is just kind of like the nail in the coffin. The article goes on to say the informal encounters give teams expected to seek significant general manager or front office hires this offseason, such as the Commanders, a jump start on the eventual proceedings. And I appreciate that. Thank you very much, because there's a lot of teams out there that's still holding on to their GMs, hoping to make like a playoff push or something like that may not even end up keeping their GMs by this time next season. Like they'll probably have a new GM entering the 2024 regular season. But those teams are better than us right now. So the teams that are clearly the worst teams in the NFL, clearly changing GMs. I like the fact that we get at least a few weeks of a head start over some of those other teams who may also need a new GM in the 2024 cycle. We'll see how this goes. And there's a lot of really interesting, useful information in this article, but I'm trying to skip specifically to certain parts. The next part I wanted to read out to y'all is, quote, the type of structured hierarchy Harris desires is a significant question. Great question. General manager led, another coach centric setup? No, never again. Don't ever do that again. Don't bring Bill Belichick with that mess. Don't allow Ron Rivera to ever do that again. And don't allow another head coach to ever run anything like that ever again. Can we get a normal setup, please? President of football operations above all. That's interesting. Through homework, though homework began weeks before, those details might not become clearer until after Washington completes his final 4 games. Well, now we're down to the final 3. As one league source projected, the same is true of the names of potential targets for 4 of 5 GM openings. Multiple candidates viewed as options for teams were expected to participate in the Accelerator program. The Commanders' leadership held court with those in attendance, and Harris's charm made a strong impression, according to league sources attending the meetings. So those sources there, I'm pretty sure they asked potential GMs that were there, and they gave the feedback like, hey man, this Josh Harris guy seems pretty cool. Like, I'm kind of rocking with him. I mean, you know, GMs, they're smart people. They're GMs for a reason. They probably were already doing their homework on all the situations around the league, the Commanders, the Chargers, all that type of stuff. But in the Raiders, maybe potentially, there's a lot of teams out there that will potentially need a GM. But then after meeting him in person, talking to him face to face, him giving his spiel, his pitch and all of that type of stuff, his elevator pitch to the GMs, the fact that he made a strong impression definitely helps our case as far as GMs go. Now, before we move on, Ben Standig doesn't necessarily address this. He just brought up the question that we just read a few minutes ago, but all signs are pointing to the fact that we're going to go hire GM hires head coach, and then GM and head coach, or more than likely just GM himself hires defensive coordinator, and then from there, you know, everything falls where it needs to, as far as like tight ends coach, offensive lines coach, running backs coach, QBs coach, defensive line linebacker. You see what I'm saying, all the way through DBs coach, all of that type of stuff. So this is going to be very general manager led, but I also want to point out the fact that Eugene Shin is going to have a heavy influence and say on a lot of things. I think he's going to have a lot more power than people think. I think Eugene Shin is going to have a big say in who the general manager ends up being. And then if the general manager's running everything, I'm not saying he's a Eugene Shin puppet, but I'm pretty sure his ideals will directly align with Eugene Shin's. They're going to definitely think alike. So it's going to almost be like a Eugene Shin clone running the front office and making decisions for things like that. So I'm super excited. I mean, Eugene Shin, Josh Harris are definitely going to come together, and I'm pretty sure they will hire the right GM. I'm super excited about that. It's definitely going to be an analytically based, progressive, innovative, creative thinker that's doing things that other teams aren't doing just yet. We're going to be ahead of the curve. I'm super excited about that. And just to let you know, John Keim and other trustworthy Commanders reporters have done their research, and based on things that they're hearing, and also on how Josh Harris has structured his teams for his other leagues, like he has the hockey team, he has the NBA team. Basically, he prefers to hire GM first and lets the GM handle everything after that. So it sounded like that's more than likely the route that we're going to end up going with. And then also moving on, Ben Standig breaks down a lot of the potential candidates that we could be looking at. He said, and I'm going to do a whole video separate on this. Again, I'm doing deep research on all of the potential GM candidates that we can be looking for to take from other teams, or guys that maybe aren't even GMing for a team currently, or may not even have a GM role at their current team. They may be doing something else, and we can bring them in as a GM and give them that opportunity, their first opportunity in that lane. And I also want to try to figure out which GM I prefer. At the very least, make like a top 3, top 5 list. So be on the lookout for that. But just real quick, Ben Standig breaks down the fact that Chicago Bears assistant general manager Ian Cunningham is arguably the most high-profile name among the 42 candidates selected by the respective teams to attend. There were 42 GM candidates there too. I want to also point that out. 42 potential GM candidates were at that meeting. This wasn't just like a handful, 5 to 10, a dozen guys. 42. So it sounds like Josh Harris made a great impression on a lot of potential candidates, and it seems more, if anything, we will have our picking of who we want rather than us fighting to get them. I feel like they'll be fighting to potentially be one of our GMs. I hope that's how that works out, and I have a good feeling that it may turn out like that. The Virginia native turned down an offer last year to become the Arizona Cardinals GM. Cunningham previously worked in the Philadelphia Eagles and Baltimore Ravens organizations, and both of those teams are doing very well right now. Other names to watch include the Las Vegas Raiders interim GM Champ Kelly, New Orleans Saints assistant GM Vice President of Football Operations Kyle Harley, Cleveland Browns assistant GM Vice President of Football Operations Catherine Rache, maybe that's like Rache, I don't know exactly how you pronounce that. Los Angeles Chargers Director of Player Personnel JoJo Wooden, Browns assistant GM Glenn Cook, and Eagles Director of Player Personnel Charles Walls. And it's a lot of people, a lot of different titles, a lot of different backgrounds that are all competing for the same job. I'm super excited, man. A lot of great candidates out there. The Raiders elevated Kelly from assistant GM to interim GM after firing Dave Ziegler earlier in the season, and they may eventually drop the temporary tag. Washington interviewed Wooden in 2021 for his GM opening that ultimately went to Martin Mayhew. Not a great decision. I mean, we probably could have jumped on that earlier, or maybe he just didn't want to be a part of the mess that was inevitable. He probably foresaw the future. Dan Snyder's still there. He was like, nah, I'm good. So it may not even be a thing where we didn't want him. Maybe he just didn't want us. So just to give you a little background on a few of the candidates and top names that are out there, but they didn't even talk about like Alec Hallaby, who's a lot of people's favorite option and things like that. But again, I'm gonna do a deep dive and a full like 30-minute breakdown of potential GM candidates and who are the top candidates, who are my favorite candidates, why and why not, like their history. What have they done with the different stops they've had around the NFL? How did they improve the team that they were at? Why should we hire those guys as a GM type of thing? So be on the lookout for that. Moving on, again, shuffling through the article a little bit further. Ben Standig quoted Raichi from the Browns, said, quote, "I think it's an amazing opportunity for all the candidates, not only to gain professional and personal development opportunities, exposure to ownership and top executives, but also to get to know each other." Washington Senior Director of Player Personnel Eric Stokes also attended the meeting, which is pretty interesting. Shouts out to him. So it seems like he's going to be pretty involved moving forward with the organization. I think he'll pretty much stay there. We'll see about Jason Wright. I'm not exactly sure with him, but it sounds like Eric Stokes will be a part of the Burgundy and Gold's future. Also moving on, really interesting as far as the where the stadium is going to go, how it's going to be and stuff like that. And we'll dive into that a little bit more soon. But Virginia snagging 2 teams would seemingly pit Maryland and Washington against one another, each facing significant pressure to secure a win. The team plays in Maryland's Prince George's County, and the state has committed $400 million to a new stadium project. Nostalgia is primary reason for the district, with the organization eyeing a possible return to the RFK Stadium site the team called home until 1997. Resolving the stadium issue while pressing won't come until long after Washington determines its internal football leadership going forward. So we got to get this GM who's going to run football operations. Is it going to be Jason Wright or not? What's Eric Stokes' exact role and title going to be if he's still here? Eugene Shen, all of that type of stuff. We got to get all of that set before we even start thinking stadium, is basically the point. But that's a good point that Ben Standig brings up with the Capitals and the Wizards going to Virginia. Now that pretty much basically leaves Maryland and DC fighting for the Commanders right now, and Virginia probably isn't as much in the race anymore. Also, really interesting news that I don't think people really thought about. Josh Harris and David Blitzer still have not sold their minority shares in the Steelers just yet. That must happen after Harris's purchase of the Commanders, with Blitzer among the investors. But it does not happen immediately under NFL rules. It does not have to happen immediately, but like soon, Josh Harris needs to sell his minority shares for the Steelers because things are complicated right now. Also, shouts out to Ben Standig for another article with The Athletic. He tweeted, Josh Harris's NFL fact-finding tour reached LA, specifically futuristic SoFi Stadium and a Rams franchise with a clear football plan. His Commanders lack both components. There's no saving this season, but the rookie owner will soon show what he's learned. Now, Ben Standig does a whole evaluation of the roster and the coaching staff, but I just want to give y'all what he's saying about the stadium potentially. He said the Washington Commanders managing partner has spent his rookie year traveling with the franchise he and members of his ownership team purchased for $6.05 billion in July. There's some basic familiarization happening with these visits, with significant information gathering is also necessary considering the fixes required on and off the field. Because Ben Standig is going to basically talk about how not only are we worrying about the future stadium, but the future stadium is so far away, we need to worry about our current stadium as well. Moving on with the article. Tours of stadiums, including this futuristic SoFi Stadium, home of the Los Angeles Rams that we just played against yesterday, will help shape all aspects of the house Harris and friends eventually build in the Washington DMV area, wherever it ends up being. And I like the fact that every time we play a team, especially it's an away game, we go to their stadium. It's a nice stadium. Josh Harris is going there on business. Whether we win or lose, it doesn't matter to him. He's going there on official business to check out the stadium and to get ideas of how he may want his next stadium to be built like. But not only his next stadium, how can we improve the stadium that we currently have? Again, continuing with the article, from the look of the building to gauging best practices for a fan-friendly game day experience, any structure and scene will be a clear upgrade whenever the venue project happens. The longer this season, the more the same applies to the team. Unlike a stadium that will not open for several years, the football fixes need immediate attention for this current stadium. Similar to how stadium considerations for LA's Mediterranean climate don't fit in the mid-Atlantic region, the translucent roof is open on three sides, allowing for cool breezes to permeate the 70,000 seat space. There's no one-size-fits-all contention plan for NFL teams. That's a great point by Ben Standig. Like, some of the cool things that the Rams are able to do due to their climate, that where the stadium is at, we may not be able to do that, but we can still take some great ideas. And I like the fact that he also points out the fact that it may not even just be how the stadium is built, but how, as far as do we have a roof, do we have turf or grass, things like that, how it's built, the infrastructure and things like that. Also looking at it from a fan-friendly game day experience wise, what are some of the little small details that we can include in the next stadium to just make it a better experience for fans going there as well. So I'm super excited about the fact that Josh Harris is even thinking about all of these things, and it's kind of assumed he should be, but to hear that he actually is has me very excited. Speaking of being excited, why the Commanders fans should be a lot more excited than we are right now. Shouts out to George Carmi for these next couple of points. Again, follow him on Twitter, on YouTube. I completely agree. The reason I always want to showcase these points because I have these ideas, but I like the way that they word it, and also want to give them some shine because they're all great Commanders, YouTubers, content creators on Twitter, all of that type of stuff. So I always want to give people shine whenever they can when I see tweets that I definitely agree with. So George Carmi's first tweet: in terms of potential job openings, I'd argue that the Commanders position is more interesting for a GM as opposed to head coach. I completely agree. I completely agree. All of the qualities we reference: $90 million in cap space, potential to get more easily. Charles Leno, Logan Thomas, you can cut them and easily hit over $100 million. 5 picks in the top 100. A young quarterback, if it works, we'll see whether that's a thing or not. And then, all of that is just here you go. Making an immediate impact to a roster, completely flip this thing upside down, going from Martin Mayhew to the next GM. You could come in year one and make it feel like your team already. And that's a very rare opportunity. That's not typical. But as far as head coach, with a lifespan of usually 4 to 5 years, I'm not sure there is an enough immediate impact players that you are excited about. And that's a good point as well. As far as the next GM, we are a very shiny next destination. But when it comes to head coach, I mean, Lord have mercy. I mean, if you're looking at our team needs, I mean, you're talking about our top needs at potentially quarterback right now after the game Sam Howell had, tackle, edge rusher, cornerback, and wide receiver. Those are some of the most expensive positions to try to get in the draft, free agency, and stuff like that. And we have big needs at all of them. But not to even think about the fact that we still need help at safety, tight end, interior offensive line, center, guard, all of that. And then on top of all of that, GM-wise, you're happy about the fact that we have so many pending unrestricted free agents like Kendall Fuller, Cam Curl, Antonio Gibson, Curtis Samuel. So many starters. Our starting edge rushers after you trade away Montez Sweat and Chase Young, Casey Hill, and James Smith-Williams. Your franchise, I guess, kicker and Joey Slye. Your all-pro special teamer and Jeremy Reeves. Khaleke Hudson is looking good finally. He's an unrestricted. I mean, Cody Barton, David Mayo, and Khaleke Hudson. Everybody except for Jamin Davis, who is currently on IR and may not even be available for week 1 of next year. We'll see how that goes. He probably will be, but you just never know. Outside of Jamin Davis, who's on IR, all our other top 3 linebackers are all unrestricted free agents. So on the GM side, you're like, hey, man, I can do a complete 180 on this roster. That's great. But as a head coach, you're like, man, that's a lot of holes to fill, man. What am I about to work with in my first year? So I completely agree with George Carmi there. This is a really interesting balance of great destination for one of the top GMs. If you're a guy that you feel like you could be the next great GM in the NFL, the Commanders is a great canvas to work with. But if you're a head coach, you're like, oh my Lord, this is about to be a lot of work. Now, it's kind of boom or bust for a head coach though, because again, that same canvas, you can make that work, and then you can look like one of the best head coaches. Like, dang, look what they did to take the Rivera 4-win, hopefully at the end of this season. Hopefully we're 4-13. I'm really hoping for that top draft pick. You took that 4-13 Rivera-led Commanders, Martin Mayhew, and then you turned it into this competitive team that's fighting for a playoff spot, playoff contender, maybe even Super Bowl contender within a year or two, something like that. Just say, for example, like, that's a great thing to put on your resume. You took this trash and turned it into this gold. So it's kind of boom or bust. I wouldn't say it's bad for head coach, but it's boom or bust. But for a GM, it's excellent. You have a super blank canvas to basically work with. Shouts out to Ref the District, another YouTube account, content creator, Twitter account that I always want to shout out as well. They bring up a great point. It might take 3 years to build a Super Bowl contender like the Lions, Jaguars, or Dolphins, but don't tell that to the Texans, Colts, and Browns, who are competing for playoffs after horrific 2022 seasons. The Colts haven't had their starting quarterback for the past few weeks. They just lost their starting wide receiver, and their starting running back missed the first few weeks, came back for a little while, missed again, came back for a little while, and is gone again, and they're still competing. No excuse. QB1, running back 1, wide receiver 1, all hurt, and they're still winning games. The Texans, they just had the number 2 overall pick, and CJ Stroud, the person they spent that pick on, is hurt right now as well, and they're still finding ways to win games as well. So it's just like no excuses. So I feel like, just based on that, shouts out to Ref the District again. You have the Lions, Jags, and Dolphins that it took them about 3 years to rebuild. So I'm feeling like that should be like the expectation. But the hope should be that we could turn this around within one season like the Texans, Colts, Broncos, and Browns. That's the reason I brought that tweet up. Also, shouts out to D_right_1 for bringing this up. According to Over the Cap, we have about $90 million in cap space. We could easily get more potential cap casualties as far as savings. Charles Leno could give you an additional $7.5 million. Logan Thomas can give you an additional $6.5 million. This is something I've been screaming to y'all for the past few weeks, that we can end up with over $100 million worth of cap space. And then if you want to get real petty, Andrew Wiley, you cut him, you get back 1.5. T. Scott, you get back 1.3, and Nick Gates, you get back 133,000 if you really want to be petty like that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the next regime wants to get a top tackle in free agency or the draft. So Charles Leno, we can assume we're going to go ahead and save probably about $8 million worth of cap space. And then I don't think the next regime is going to want to keep Logan Thomas. So that'll be another $6.5 million as well. We'll see. But shouts out to Grant Paulson for bringing this up as well. Make sure you follow him on Twitter and all of that. Another great person to follow. I completely agree, but again, the reason I'm bringing up these content creators is because I want to give them a shout out, and also I just feel like they worded it so beautifully. Couldn't have said it better myself. He said, I'm not sure who needs to hear this, but this is an amazing time to be a Commanders fan. For the first time in 30 years, you're about to have a true GM head coach structure. The team has tons of money to spend in a great early round draft situation. Pick your head ups. The several months ahead are going to be a blast. Again, as a Commanders fan, I'm super excited. Shouts out my boy David Harrison over there. Shouts out to him. Follow him on Twitter as well. He brought up a great point. He basically quote tweeted that exact tweet that I just brought up from Grant Paulson and said, I try to never be a guy who tells fans what real fans do or don't do, but I sure hope all Commanders fans embrace the potential of what this offseason could lead to. It's hard to open yourself up to more disappointment, but it's worth the risk. I would add, especially this time around. If there's a time to put your heart into the Commanders organization for an offseason, this is the time. I'm very optimistic for the reasons I've already explained, and you should be too. Now, if you're not, I understand. Just like David Harrison brought up, I understand that, you know, it's really hard to open yourself up again to another offseason and regular season of disappointment potentially in 2024. But I'm telling you, if there's a time to finally believe, it's now. Especially if we're banking on potential for reasons I've already stated, it's now. But yeah, man, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Again, I'm working on a Cameron Cheeseman got cut video because, again, there's more angles we need to look at for that. I'm going to do a deeper dive into this whole Capitals and Wizards moving to Virginia and how that truly affects us. And even like KD commented on it, so we're going to talk about that. I'm working on top GM candidates video, top head coaching candidates video, all of that type of stuff. And then again, I'm probably gonna do that mock draft tomorrow. I wanted to do it today, but then all this other news broke out, like what I'm talking about today, and then Cameron Cheeseman finally got cut. I'm probably gonna go ahead and get that out the way. So the mock draft will probably be here tomorrow, as in Tuesday. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Again, if you're not a channel member, go ahead and become one because I'm working on exclusive content for y'all as well. So man, without further ado, I appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.